There's a certain kind of tired that doesn't come from work. It comes from being the man everyone leans on, and never really knowing where you're allowed to lean back. It's the tired you feel when your phone lights up and, before you even see the name, you already know you're going to say yes. Yes to listening, yes to fixing, yes to showing up, whether or not you have anything left. And over the years, you've started calling that being a good Christian man, as if the measure of your faith is how uncomfortable you're willing to be so everyone else can stay comfortable. The hard part is, you can live like that for a long time and never feel more Christ-like. You just feel more drained, more quietly resentful, and more confused about why doing the right thing leaves you feeling this hollow. Scripture has a name for what that is. In Proverbs 29:25 it says, "Fear of man will prove to be a snare." Not a personality trait, not just a tendency you were born with. A snare, a trap. And most of us walked into it slowly, one yes at a time, convinced the whole time we were being faithful. And if you see yourself anywhere in this, this is for you too. If you pull back and look at the last few years, this didn't show up as one big moment. It showed up as a slow accumulation of yeses you didn't really mean. You said yes to covering that extra shift, even though you were running on fumes. You said yes to driving across town because a family member was in another mess, and you knew the call wouldn't be short. You said yes to staying late after church to help, even though you'd promised yourself you'd go home and rest. You gave out pieces of your time, your energy, your attention, until there's almost nothing that's actually yours anymore. From the outside, you look reliable, you look kind, you look like the strong one who always shows up. People praise you for it. Man, you have such a servant's heart. And you nod, because you don't know how to explain that you're tired and quietly angry, and not sure who to blame. Inside, it feels less like service and more like being slowly erased. And here's what that costs. And here's what that costs you that you rarely gets named. When you're permanently tuned to everyone else's frequency, you eventually lose the ability to clearly hear God's. You're so occupied responding to the loudest needs in the room that there's no space left to hear what He's actually calling you toward, what He's building in you, and what He's directing you to do. People-pleasing doesn't just drain your energy. Over time, it atrophies your spiritual discernment. When you look at Jesus, you see a man who poured himself out. He healed, He taught, He let people interrupt His plans. But Scripture is also clear that Jesus had no fear of man. He only feared God. He wasn't a man-pleaser. He left towns where people needed healing. He went to the mountain alone when the crowd wanted to make Him king. He waited for 4 days before going to Lazarus, not because He didn't care, but because He was operating from the Father's instruction, not from the fear of disappointing people around Him. Jesus served from calling, not from fear of what people would think. Let me bring this into some specific moments, because this isn't theory. This is the stuff you bump into every week. First moment, your phone rings at the end of a long day. It's a family member who rarely calls with good news. You're sitting down for the first quiet 10 minutes you've had all day, and you feel the tension in your chest before you even answer. The usual pattern? You pick up and give them as much time as they want, even as your body is saying, "We're done." You tell yourself, "They need me. I can't just ignore them. This is what I'm here for." You stay on the phone, absorb their anxiety, and make promises, and when you hang up, the room is quiet, but your head is loud. Before you answer, there's a question worth asking yourself. Is picking up right now coming from genuine capacity and care, or from fear of what happens if I don't? Because if it's fear, you're not really serving them. You're serving your own need to be seen as available. A different response might sound like, "Hey, I'm glad you called, but I don't have much left tonight. I've got about 10 minutes. What's going on?" Or even, "I care about you, but I'm wiped and I wouldn't be helpful right now. Can we talk tomorrow?" That's not abandonment. That's honesty. And honesty is always more loving than the performance of availability. In the second moment, someone at work or at church or anywhere else asks you to take on one more thing. You know your schedule. You know you're already stretched. Most men say yes before they've even thought about it because the fear of being seen as selfish or unspiritual kicks in faster than discernment. So you say yes and then spend the next week rearranging everything in your life to make room for a commitment that never should have been yours. A grounded alternative to this would be, hey, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I can't take that on and still show up well for what I've already committed to. Or, let me look at what I've actually got capacity for and get back to you. That gives you room to answer from clarity instead of from pressure. In the third moment, in your own home, you're the default flex point. Plans get changed. Holidays get rearranged. Extended family makes demands. And you're the one who adjusts, so no one else has to be uncomfortable. The pattern is to swallow it and call it love, but over time you start feeling a quiet anger, not just at them, but at yourself for never saying, this is too much. A different response might sound like, I want to support where I can, but if we say yes to this, something else has to give. Let's actually talk through what that costs us. Across all three, the same question applies. If I wasn't worried about how they'd see me, would I still be saying yes? Now here's where it gets tangled for a lot of good men. You hear all of this and you think, but didn't Jesus tell us to deny ourselves? To take up our cross? To put others before ourselves? Isn't that exactly what I've been trying to do? I want to be careful here because that instinct to serve, to sacrifice, and to show up, that's not the problem. That instinct is something God can absolutely work through. But let me be clear about what deny yourself actually means. Because the church has handed a generation of men a version of that phrase that does quiet damage. In its original context, to deny yourself means to deny your own will. The part of you that wants comfort over obedience, ease over calling, approval over truth. It's not about erasing yourself. It is not about dismantling your judgment or your calling just so the people around you can stay comfortable. They're not the same thing, and most men have never been taught the difference. This isn't about swinging to the other extreme. This isn't about closing your eyes to people's needs or deciding from now on it's all about you. This isn't about excusing coldness and calling it conviction. It's about finally being honest. There's a difference between Christ-like sacrifice and slowly erasing yourself because you are terrified of being seen as someone who let people down. Again, Proverbs 29:25 calls the fear of man a snare, not a flaw, a trap, which means there's a way out. And the way out starts by understanding that this fear is not neutral. It's a choice about whose voice you're answering. Paul names it directly in Galatians 1:10. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? He doesn't offer a middle ground. He doesn't say, well, it depends on the situation. He frames it as an either or, because at the core of people pleasing, underneath all of the exhaustion and resentment, there is a choice being made about who you are actually serving. In Colossians 3:23, you get the anchor. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Your effort, your service, your yes, it's meant to be rooted in an audience of one, not a rotating cast of people whose approval you're trying to keep. I can look back at seasons where I was everyone's go-to person. I said yes so often that people almost stopped asking if I had limits. And if you had talked to me then, I would have called it faithfulness. But if I'm honest, most of those yeses were less about what God was calling me to and more about my fear of what people would think if I didn't come through. That's not the cross Jesus asked me to carry. That was a weight I picked up because I didn't know how to put it down. If any of this sounds uncomfortably familiar, I want you to stay with me for just a few more minutes. What I want to give you is one question, one simple question you can carry into your week that will start to help you sort out when you're serving from strength and when you're serving from fear. It won't fix everything overnight. This kind of pattern took years to build, and it doesn't entangle in a single conversation. But if you'll be honest with it, this question will start to show you things. And seeing clearly is always where the change begins. Stay with me. Here's the question. Am I doing this from strength or from fear of what happens if I don't? That's it. Before you answer the text, before you take the call, before you say yes to one more thing, pause and ask it honestly. Not the answer that makes you look good, the real answer. Because when you serve from the fear of being seen as selfish, from the fear of letting someone down, or from the fear of the guilt you'll feel if you say no, you are not actually answering God. You are answering your own need for people's approval. And over time, those two voices start to sound the same. And that is the danger. To put it plainly, you can convince yourself that managing everyone else's feelings is God's call on your life, but it isn't. The distinction you're learning to draw is this. Compassion says, I see that you're struggling, and I want to help where I genuinely can. Fear says, I can't handle what happens if I disappoint you, so I'll say yes and pay for it later. One of those builds you over time, the other hollows you out. When I need to come back to this, the line I return to is simply, I was not made to keep everyone comfortable. I was made to keep faith with the one who made me. Not because people don't matter, they do, but because the most loving thing I can do for the people in my life is to show up as a man who is actually whole, not as a man who's given away every piece of himself, trying to make sure no one is disappointed. So let me say the plainest version of this. You were not called to manage everyone's emotional experience. You were called to become the man God designed you to be. And those two things are not always compatible. One day, you will not stand before the people who spent your life trying not to disappoint. You'll stand before the one who made you. And he won't ask whether everyone is comfortable. He'll ask whether you kept faith with what he put in you. The most loving thing you can do for your family, for the people who depend on you, for the men who are watching how you carry yourself, is to stop performing availability and start living from actual purpose. That's not selfish, that's faithful. And if you see yourself anywhere in this, this is for you too. If this helped you, I'd be grateful if you shared it with someone who needs it. And if you're new here, this channel is about being honest with ourselves, coming back to what's true, and doing the hard work of becoming the men we were actually made to be. Subscribe if you want to keep going. I'm Wade, and this is God and Grit.